I've always loved the beach, especially at night. There's something soothing about the endless stretch of waves crashing in the dark, the salty wind, and the feeling of isolation that only a beach at night can bring. But one night, that peace was shattered by something I can't fully explain. It was late. The beach was almost empty, with just a few stragglers gathered around a dying bonfire in the distance. I decided to walk along the shore to clear my head. The waves were gentle, and the only sound besides the surf was the soft crunch of sand under my feet. But as I looked out to the sea, I noticed something strange. A figure standing ankle-deep in the water, completely motionless. They were too far away to make out clearly, but the figure seemed wrong somehow. It was tall, and even though it was dark, I could tell it was facing me. My steps slowed as a chill ran through me, and I was struck by an intense feeling that I shouldn't look too closely. But despite that instinct, I kept walking toward it. The closer I got, the more I could see. The figure's clothes seemed heavy and soaked, hanging awkwardly from their body as if they'd been submerged for a long time. Their hair clung to their head in wet strands. When I was about 20 feet away, I froze. I don't know what it was about that moment, but something in me screamed to stop. The figure was staring directly at me now, unmoving, and I could feel its eyes boring into me. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if it had some sort of hold over me. My chest tightened, and my breath came shallow as I stood there, locked in a silent staring match with this thing. Then, slowly, the figure raised one arm and pointed straight at me. I can't describe the terror that flooded me at that moment. It was like pure dread washed over me. I turned and sprinted back up the beach, not stopping until I was near the distant glow of the bonfire. When I looked back, the figure was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. To this day, I can't go near the beach at night. Whatever I saw that night was real, and the memory of that figure, pointing at me from the dark water, haunts me still. A few friends and I had rented a beach house for the weekend, eager to escape the city and relax by the sea. It was a remote beach, the kind that barely shows up on the map, and we were all thrilled by the idea of having it all to ourselves. We arrived late in the afternoon, and by nightfall, we had settled into the house, ready for a weekend of bonfires and good times. But on our first night, we were in for something none of us expected. Around midnight, a thick fog rolled in. I'd never seen anything like it. One moment, the beach was clear, and the next, the world outside was completely shrouded. We could barely see the water from the porch. My friend Dan dared me to take a walk on the beach, saying it would be like a horror movie. Not one to back down from a dare, I grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the shore. At first, it was thrilling. The fog gave everything an eerie vibe, and the beam from my flashlight only reached a few feet in front of me. The world around me was quiet, almost too quiet, and I found myself feeling strangely vulnerable. But the excitement turned to unease when I realized I couldn't see any of the house lights anymore. The fog had swallowed everything. Panic set in as I tried to retrace my steps. I called out, but my voice seemed to get absorbed by the dense fog. Suddenly I heard something. It was faint, but it sounded like footsteps in the sand. I whipped around, shining my flashlight, but there was no one there. The footsteps grew louder, like they were circling me. I tried running, but no matter where I went, the footsteps followed. Then, just when I thought I'd lose my mind, I stumbled onto something cold and hard in the sand. It was an old, rusted anchor, tangled in seaweed, half buried in the sand. It seemed out of place, like it had been there for centuries. And in that moment, the footsteps stopped. I could feel someone or something watching me. Shaking, I bolted in what I hoped was the direction of the house. When I finally saw the glow of our porch lights, I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost cried. I never told my friends what happened, but every time I look at a foggy beach now, I remember those footsteps and the sense of something lurking just out of sight. This happened to me a few years ago during a solo beach trip. I needed some time alone to clear my head, so I booked a small cabin by a secluded beach and spent my days exploring the shore. But on the last day of my stay, I witnessed something that I still can't explain. It was late afternoon, and I was sitting by the water, watching the waves. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure floating just off the shore. It looked like a woman. Her long, dark hair spread out around her like a fan, her face turned up to the sky. My heart dropped. She wasn't moving. I ran toward the water, but as I got closer, she began to drift farther out. I called for help, but no one was around. I stood at the edge of the water, helpless, watching as she floated out to sea. Just as I was about to turn back, I saw her eyes open. They locked onto mine, cold and empty, and a horrible grin spread across her face. Terrified, I stumbled backward, but my eyes were glued to her. Slowly, she raised one arm and began to wave at me, that same horrible grin frozen on her face. It was the kind of wave you'd give to an old friend, cheerful and welcoming, but it felt wrong, like she was mocking me. And then she disappeared beneath the water without a ripple, as if she'd never been there. I waited, breathless, but she didn't resurface. Shaken, I stumbled back to my cabin, packed my things, and left. I never returned to that beach, but sometimes in my dreams, I see her floating just beyond the shore, eyes wide open, smiling that dreadful smile, as if she's waiting for me to return.